everyone, it's Jacqueline for Pixie Dust PhD. Planning a trip to Walt Disney World can be completely overwhelming and stressful. I have definitely been there myself. There are so many steps and details to consider. If you are feeling frazzled by this process, let me walk you through how I go about it and maybe that'll help you out. So here are the basics of how I plan a trip to Walt Disney World. Step 1 for me is always start saving money. Whenever I decide I think I've got a Walt Disney World trip upcoming, I start putting away money for that trip. Even if you do Disney relatively inexpensive, park tickets just are expensive. Step 2 is figure out when you can go logistically, and I mean working around your current schedule with school, other pre-planned events, big work events that you're going to have to go to and absolutely can't miss. This is after all a vacation, and so you do need to figure out when you can go that works with your day-to-day schedule. Now, if that's pretty wide open for you, you may have the luxury of deciding approximately what time of year you want to go. For example, I personally never want to go in the summer. The heat and the humidity is just too much for me. I much prefer going in the fall or winter. So once you've worked around your logistic scheduling constraints, then you can start to pick around preference about what time you would rather go. The next thing to consider are if there are any scheduled Walt Disney World events that you would really like to attend. By this, I mean things like Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party, the Very Merry Christmas Party, or maybe there's a specific festival at Epcot that you really want to check out. Very often these events are offered seasonally, so then you'll want to plan your vacation around that season when these events tend to take place. And then once you've narrowed down your options based on that, if you still have options, this is when I like to consult crowd calendars. These are not official through Disney. You will find these on third-party websites, but they can be extremely helpful in trying to figure out when crowds might be lighter at the parks. Note that there's really never a time when the parks are empty. Even a light crowd season is going to be relatively busy, but there's a big difference between going in the middle of September, after Labor Day, after folks are already back in school, versus Christmas week, for example. So in particular, if large crowds are something you want to avoid, I would definitely consult a crowd calendar. Step 3 is deciding roughly where you want to stay. I would normally narrow it down to just a couple of options at this point, and then I like to start tracking the prices of those places and eventually book them. If you are staying on Disney Vacation Club points, whether they are your own or you are renting them, that window opens up 11 months in advance, so almost an entire year you can book your accommodations. If you are planning on staying on property and you want to dine at popular locations, it would be in your best interest to have your hotel booked before the 6-month mark. As I'm filming this right now, we are sort of in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, so advanced dining reservations actually aren't opening up until 60 days in advance, but typically this happens 180 days in advance, and I'm going to assume at some point Walt Disney World will revert to that system. So if you want to snag some hard-to-get reservations, having your on-property hotel booked before that 180 days in advance mark will allow you to book dining for your entire vacation. And if dining reservations don't particularly matter to you, but FastPasses do, then you will want to have your on-property reservation booked at least 60 days in advance in order to make those FastPasses 60 days in advance. If you're planning on staying off-property, it doesn't matter as much when you book your hotel. I personally just like to track prices and then book when it drops to a certain price that I feel comfortable booking. And during this time, well in advance of my trip, when I'm tracking hotel prices, this is typically also when I track flight prices. So obviously, if you're driving down to Walt Disney World, you don't need to worry about this, but I do fly down to Walt Disney World. And so I typically keep track of what my various flight options are and how much those cost. Now, I don't often book my airfare until about 6 weeks out, but I do like to have that sort of longer-term data of the pricing to figure out what is or is not a good price. Step 4 is, in my opinion, the hardest, and this is basically you want to roughly sketch out your vacation. By this, I mean which parks are you visiting on which days, and what are you hoping to get done on those days? Like, where are you hoping to eat, what are you hoping to ride, etc. None of this is set in stone, it's just a rough sketch, but it will help you figure out everything else you need to do. If you're buying base ticket theme park admission, meaning you don't have the park hopper option, this step is maybe a little bit simpler because you really only have to plan for one park a day, and you don't have to consider switching parks necessarily in the middle of the day. Of course, confining yourself to one park a day also means confining yourself to only those parks options and the resort options, but you won't have to worry about, food in Magic Kingdom as well as food in Epcot. During this step, I tend to consult various crowd calendars in order to pick which parks I'll be attending what days. And this is true whether or not I have a park hopper. With base tickets, like I said, it makes it a little bit more straightforward, but even with park hoppers, I will still consult the crowd calendars, think about what park in the morning I want to attend and what park in the evening I want to attend. You'll also sort of have to prioritize during this time, so if there is a specific ride you definitely want to ride, I will usually slot that ride and that park day later in my vacation. This logic really only helps if you are staying on property. The idea being that the very first day of your vacation, when you start to book your FastPasses, you will have all of those extra days to try to book that thing that you really want to do on your last couple of days. And a lot of other guests staying on property won't have that booking window yet because it's not 60 or 30 days in advance of this last day of your vacation. And the same logic also applies to dining. If there is a dining location that you really want to do and it's a hard to snag reservation, when I'm sketching out my vacation in step 4, I will usually imagine that day to be sort of towards the end of my vacation. Part of this is also personal philosophy. For me, I like to leave the things that I am looking forward to the most until last in the vacation. That way you're still building up the excitement the entire time you're there. If you are planning this super far in advance, say 11 months or even further sometimes, note that often Disney hasn't released things like extra morning magic hours or even park hours for the dates of your trip. So you will need step 4 to stay relatively flexible until you are further down the line in your planning. For example, once extra morning magic hours are announced, I usually do have to rejigger my plans a little bit. If I have park hoppers, I like to go to Magic Kingdom on the mornings where there are morning extra magic hours and get there super early. I love Magic Kingdom in the morning. I think it's a great morning park. And then when I'm taking my midday break after Magic Kingdom, I almost never go back and I will park hop somewhere else. But even if you have base tickets, you might want to pay attention to those extra magic hours time slots and the various parks they're at on any given day. And if you want to avoid crowds, the canonical advice would be don't go to that park on that day. So overall, to sketch out my general vacation, I consult crowd calendars, I look at the extra magic hours schedule, and then also I just take in my general preference for what I want to do, and if I'm park hopping, which parks I prefer in the morning versus which parks I prefer in the evening. So like I said, step 4 is a lot, it's very big, it's overwhelming. If you're traveling with a party, definitely get their input, maybe try to have them help you out and take some of the burden off you, the planner. And then step 5 is deciding with a pretty high degree of confidence where you want to dine. And then for any table service restaurants, your dining booking day will come and you will book those table service restaurants. Step 6 is similar, but now it's for FastPasses. So you'll prioritize which FastPasses you're really going to try to get. And then when your booking window opens up to book those FastPasses, you will go ahead and do that. So after step 6 is done, a vast majority of your planning should be done and you can pretty much relax. At this point, I do tend to fine tune things. I will start to try to shift reservations up or down, maybe a half hour, depending on what's going on in the day. And also, if I wasn't able to snag an advanced dining reservation or a FastPass I really, really wanted, I will continue to check that multiple times a day and try to make those reservations. This does not always work out, but you would be surprised how often it will work out. For example, on my last trip to Walt Disney World, I went with my partner and 2 of our friends. All of us really wanted to go to Oga's Cantina, but none of us were able to snag a reservation for 4 people at all, like at any time of day. We would have gone first thing in the morning, honestly. And so all 4 of us agreed to just casually check for reservations when we had a few moments to spare. We would look either on the app on our phones or online at disneyworld.com. And one day, not that long before our trip, my friend did manage to snag a really great reservation. It was for all 4 of us, and I think it was around 7 p.m. People are constantly adjusting their plans when they're going to Walt Disney World. And so you never really know when dining reservations or FastPasses that were previously occupied are now freed up and for you to take. Step 7 for me tends to be booking transportation, so my flights to and from Orlando. I almost never do this more than 60 days in advance, but it's very, very important that you do finish this step. So even though you're very consumed in the details of your Disney time, don't forget that you do have to get to Orlando and get back home. And if you're using Disney's Magical Express bus, once you've booked your flights, you'll want to go ahead and update all of that information. And throughout this entire process, if I'm being diligent, I am keeping an eye on that Disney Specials page and looking for any new room discounts or free dining package or anything like that. And if those come up after I've already booked some stuff, I will see if I can get those to apply to my reservation. Often you'll have to call Disney to do this, or if you don't really want to handle that, you can definitely work with a Disney-specific travel agent. I have never worked with a travel agent myself, not yet anyway. I'm considering doing it for my upcoming trip. Basically just because I really like being in control of everything. But if all of this sounds like a lot and it's really overwhelming and you want someone else there to help you out and back you up, definitely a travel agent is a good option. And then step 8 is really relax and enjoy. Typically, once I'm around 30 days out from my vacation, I stop tinkering with things. Even if it's not 100% everything you ever wanted, it's still going to be an amazing vacation. And at some point, it is just worth it for me to stop and accept how it's going to be and be happy with that than to be constantly refreshing and checking the app for new FastPasses or new dining reservations. So at some point, you need to just stop, relax, and enjoy the fruits of your labor. And that is basically how I go through planning a Walt Disney World vacation. It is absolutely a lot of steps, but I do tend to start pretty dang early, so it's a lot spread out over a very long period of time. It doesn't feel too bad to me. And honestly, the part where you're sort of figuring out what your vacation will be, deciding where to go on what days, what you want to eat, what FastPasses you're hoping to get, I think that that's really fun. And often if I'm overwhelmed with work or another aspect of my life, I will take 20 or 30 minutes away to think about my upcoming Disney trip and do some planning. For me, it's exciting to think about upcoming trips, and also that planning time really does pay off in the end. Like I said, I then get to enjoy all the fruits of my labor once I'm on vacation. If you found this information helpful, I hope you consider liking the video. If you're a returning viewer and subscriber, thanks so much for coming back, and if you're new here, I hope you stick around and subscribe. Ring the bell icon for notifications whenever I post new videos. If you want to chat about anything Disney, leave a comment down below, or you can find me on other platforms like Twitter and Instagram at PixieDustPhD. What part of the Disney planning process do you enjoy the most, and what part do you dread the most? Is there anything you do during your planning that I didn't talk about that you think would be helpful for other people to know? Leave a comment down below. I hope the rest of your day is super magical, and we'll see you next time at PixieDustPhD.